The phone rang at 3 in the morning, and my entire world tilted. On the screen, I saw the hospital's number. My chest tightened as I answered, and a voice on the other end said, "Your grandfather is having a heart attack. You need to come right away." I jumped out of bed and threw on the first clothes I could grab. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Grandpa Elias wasn't just my grandfather. He was the man who raised me when no one else seemed to want me. He was the one who taught me how to ride a bike, who sat through my awkward middle school choir concerts, who called me every Sunday no matter what. The thought of losing him felt like losing the only safe place I had ever known. I drove through the empty streets, gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my fingers ached. I kept whispering to myself, "Hold on, Grandpa. Just hold on." When I finally pulled into the hospital parking lot, I ran inside without even noticing I had left my car door open. That's when I saw him, my brother Caleb, standing in front of the emergency room doors like a guard. His arms were crossed, his face set in a cold glare. I tried to push past him, but he stepped directly in front of me. "You can't go in," he said flatly. My voice cracked. "What do you mean? He's my grandpa. I need to see him." Caleb's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Family only. You were adopted, remember?" The words cut through me like a knife. Before I could respond, 2 security guards appeared. Caleb didn't move as they grabbed my arms and pulled me away from the door. I twisted, begged, pleaded, but no one in my family, my mother, my uncle, my cousins, said a single word. They all stood by and watched as if I truly didn't belong. I was shoved outside into the cold night air and the doors locked behind me. My knees gave out on the pavement. I sat in the parking lot shaking and crying, wondering how everything could unravel in an instant. But I had no idea that in just a few minutes the doctor would walk out, holding a clipboard, and call for the one person Grandpa trusted more than anyone else, the person he had chosen as his medical power of attorney. Before that night, everything in my life felt ordinary. I had just finished a long shift at work and was sitting at my small kitchen table, sipping tea and scrolling through my phone. My apartment was quiet, the kind of silence that can feel comforting and lonely at the same time. I was tired, but my mind wandered the way it often did when I thought about family. My relationship with them had always been complicated. My mother, Lorraine, kept her distance, speaking to me more out of obligation than affection. My uncle Martin never hid his disapproval, constantly reminding me that I wasn't really part of their bloodline. Caleb, my older brother, seemed to carry a bitterness toward me that only grew worse over the years. He loved reminding me that I was different. But Grandpa Elias was different. He made me believe I belonged when no one else would. I could still picture his weathered hands steadying the handlebars as he taught me to ride my first bike. He had this way of cheering the loudest at every school performance, even when I sang off key or forgot my lines. Every Sunday, without fail, he called me, even if the conversation lasted only a few minutes. He always said the same words at the end, "Don't forget, Clara, you're my brightest star." That bond between us wasn't just family, it was survival. When my mother grew colder and Caleb more hostile, Grandpa's love became my anchor. He saw me as his granddaughter in every sense of the word, even if others whispered that I didn't truly belong. I remembered one evening on his porch last summer, he looked at me with that soft, steady gaze of his and said, "People will show their true faces when life tests them. Don't let their words decide who you are. You know the truth, Clara, and so do I." I didn't realize how much weight those words carried until that night at the hospital. So when the phone rang at 3 a.m., it wasn't just a call about a medical emergency. It was a call that threatened the one relationship that had ever felt unconditional. The thought of losing him filled me with panic because Grandpa wasn't just my grandfather, he was my home. This section builds empathy for the narrator, establishes her outsider role in the family, and highlights her deep connection with Grandpa, making the betrayal in the hospital hit even harder. When I burst through the hospital entrance, the air was thick with fluorescent light and the faint smell of disinfectant. My shoes squeaked against the tile as I sprinted toward the emergency wing. My only thought was to reach Grandpa before it was too late. Then I saw him, Caleb, standing in front of the double doors like he owned them. His arms were folded across his chest, his jaw set hard. "I need to see Grandpa," I said, my breath coming out ragged. He didn't move. His eyes narrowed and his voice came sharp. "You're not going in." Confusion and anger collided in my chest. "What are you talking about? He's my grandfather. They called me too. He's in there fighting for his life and I'm going in." Caleb leaned closer, lowering his voice but sharpening the words so they cut deeper. "Family only. You were adopted, remember?" The hallway seemed to freeze. I felt heat rush to my face, my heart racing so fast it was painful. "How dare you?" He raised me. "He loves me like his own. You don't get to erase that." Behind Caleb, I saw them. My mother, Lorraine, standing with her arms crossed, eyes cold and detached. Uncle Martin beside her, muttering something under his breath, but making no move to stop what was happening. Even the cousins stood silently, watching like I was an intruder who had wandered in by mistake. Not one person defended me. I tried to push past, my hand reaching for the door, but Caleb shoved me back. That's when two security guards approached. One of them spoke calmly, as if I were some stranger causing a scene. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step away from this area." I shook my head violently. He's my grandfather. I belong in there. Please, just let me see him." My voice cracked, tears already burning in my eyes. Caleb's smirk widened as he stepped aside, giving the guards room to take me. "She's not family," he said firmly. "Escort her out." The guards didn't hesitate. They each grabbed one of my arms and pulled me back. I fought against their grip, my voice rising in desperation. "Don't do this! Grandpa would want me in there. You can't keep me out like this." The only response was silence from the people I had spent my life trying to belong to. Their faces were blank, cold, almost satisfied as I was dragged away from the doors. The glass doors closed in front of me with a final snap. I was shoved outside into the icy night air, the sharp chill hitting me harder than the guards' hands had. I stumbled to the curb and fell to my knees. The parking lot stretched empty around me, and the hospital loomed like a fortress I could no longer enter. I pressed my hands to my face, tears spilling uncontrollably, my body shaking from the humiliation and the grief. Inside those walls, the only person who had ever made me feel like I truly belonged was fighting for his life, and I was left outside, treated like nothing. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of my family's rejection press down with full force. Every harsh word, every cold stare, every reminder that I wasn't real family now stood in front of me as a locked door, and yet something inside me refused to leave. I sat on the curb outside the hospital, my arms wrapped around my knees, shivering in the early morning chill. The tears had dried into rough streaks on my cheeks, but the ache in my chest hadn't eased. I stared at the ground, gravel digging into my palms, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My own brother had stood between me and the only man who had ever treated me like I belonged. My mother had watched in silence, and my uncle had turned his back without hesitation. They had cast me out with a single cruel sentence: "You were adopted. You're not family." Every instinct in me screamed to walk away, to drive home and never look back. The humiliation was too much, the rejection unbearable. I could vanish from their lives and save myself from this constant reminder that I was different. My mind played it out, getting in my car, driving away from the fluorescent hospital glow, shutting out all of them forever. The idea carried a strange relief. I wouldn't have to fight anymore. I wouldn't have to beg for scraps of acceptance from people who had decided long ago that I didn't belong. But then another thought came, quiet but unshakable. If I left, I would be leaving Grandpa too, the man who called me his brightest star, the man who held my hand through every heartbreak and never once made me feel like less. He was in there right now, scared, hurting, maybe dying. And if the worst happened, I would have to live knowing that I had walked away when he needed me most. I lifted my head, breathing in sharply as determination pushed against the weight of my despair. No matter what Caleb or Lorraine or Martin thought, I was Elias Carter's granddaughter. I wouldn't abandon him now, not when everything inside me told me to stay. So I stayed. I sat in that parking lot as the minutes stretched into hours, watching the revolving doors open and close for other families. Mothers rushed inside carrying blankets. Fathers walked out pacing on their phones. Kids held coffee cups and whispered to each other about how worried they were. I watched them all, wishing for a moment that I belonged in their world of shared comfort and unconditional inclusion. But I didn't move. My body ached from the cold ground, and my eyes burned from exhaustion, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. I thought about the years Grandpa had carried me when I felt unwanted, the way he defended me when my mother dismissed me at family dinners, the way he shut down Caleb's cruel remarks with a single look, the nights he sat on the porch with me, saying things no one else in the family dared to say. Blood doesn't make a family, Clara. Love does. Those words replayed in my mind as the hospital clock ticked closer to dawn. He had been the one person who never treated me like an outsider. He had trusted me, believed in me, and loved me. Walking away now would make me no better than the people who had turned their backs. At some point, my legs grew numb from sitting too long, so I stood and began pacing the sidewalk. The automatic doors slid open and closed behind me, releasing bursts of warm air I wished I could step into. I glanced through the glass whenever I could, straining to catch a glimpse of a nurse or a doctor who might give me news. But no one came. The quiet of the early morning wrapped around me, broken only by the distant sound of sirens. My chest ached with every beat of my heart. I whispered a prayer into the cold air, words I hadn't said in years. Please let him be okay. Please let me see him again. Please don't let them take him from me, too. Then, just as I thought my legs might give out from exhaustion, the waiting room doors opened and a doctor stepped out. He was tall, with tired eyes, and a clipboard clutched in his hand. His gaze swept the crowd of people clustered near the entrance. He was searching for someone. I froze, my pulse racing as if my body already knew what was coming. The doctor cleared his throat and called out firmly, "I need to speak with the person listed as Elias Carter's medical power of attorney." For a second, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Families glanced at one another, whispering quietly, but no one stepped forward. My eyes darted to the glass doors where I could see my mother and uncle inside. Their faces shifted from confusion to unease. Caleb, still leaning against the wall with arms folded, looked caught off guard, his cocky expression faltering. The doctor scanned the room again, then looked directly at me through the glass. He lifted the clipboard slightly, checking the name, then stepped closer. "Are you Clara Carter?" he asked, his voice steady. I could hardly breathe. "Yes," I managed, my voice cracking. His eyes softened as he gave a small nod. "You're listed as Elias Carter's medical power of attorney. He chose you to make his decisions. I need to speak with you right away." The words hit me harder than anything Caleb had thrown at me. In that moment, the rejection, the humiliation, the pain of being cast aside, all of it was drowned out by the truth. Grandpa had trusted me. Above everyone else in that family, he had chosen me. I felt my back straighten, my tears drying on my face. For the first time all night, I didn't feel powerless. I felt like I belonged exactly where I was standing. And now nothing would stop me from walking back through those doors. The doctor's words rang in my ears like a bell I couldn't unhear. "You're listed as Elias Carter's medical power of attorney." For a moment, I stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring through the glass doors where my family gathered. Their faces told me everything: shock, disbelief, shame. Caleb's mouth dropped open, then snapped shut in a hard line. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. Uncle Martin muttered something under his breath and looked away. They had locked me out, humiliated me, cast me aside as though I were nothing. And yet the one man who mattered most had chosen me, and only me, to stand at his side when it counted. The doctor held the door for me, his hand gesturing firmly. "Come with me, Clara. We need to discuss your grandfather's condition." I stepped forward. My legs trembled, but not from weakness. Every step carried a weight I had been forced to carry my entire life. Years of rejection, whispers, and being reminded that I wasn't real family. Now those same steps carried me past the people who had tried to erase me. Caleb moved to block me again, but the doctor held out his arm sharply. "Sir, she is his legal representative. If you interfere, I'll have security remove you." The color drained from Caleb's face, but his fury was plain. He leaned close enough that I could feel his breath. "You think this means you're one of us? You're nothing but a mistake." I met his glare without flinching. Funny, Grandpa didn't think so. The words slipped out before I had time to soften them, and the satisfaction of watching his face twist with rage was unlike anything I had ever felt. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking back. The doctor led me through the double doors, and I could feel every pair of eyes on me as I passed. My mother shifted, her expression tightening into something unreadable. She didn't speak, didn't reach for me, didn't even try to explain. Uncle Martin folded his arms, muttering to Caleb, but their words were drowned out by the sound of my own heartbeat. We walked down the hall, and the doctor's voice broke the silence. "Mr. Carter suffered a massive heart attack. He's stable for the moment, but it was close. He'll need decisions made about his care, and legally, you're the one he trusted to do that." I nodded slowly, the truth sinking in deeper with every word. "He chose me," I whispered, almost to myself. The doctor glanced at me, his expression softening. "Yes, he trusted you above everyone else. I see that often. Sometimes the person the family overlooks is the one the patient believes in most." When we reached Grandpa's room, I paused at the door. My chest tightened as I saw him lying in the hospital bed, pale and fragile, but alive. Machines beeped softly around him, tubes running from his arms. I walked inside, my hand trembling as I reached for his. His skin was cool, but when my fingers wrapped around his eyes fluttered open. "Clara," he rasped, his voice weak but clear. Tears filled my eyes instantly. "I'm here, Grandpa. I'm not leaving you." A faint smile touched his lips. "Knew you'd stay." I pressed my forehead against his hand, gripping it as though I could hold him here by sheer will. They tried to keep me out. They told me I wasn't family. His eyes flickered with a flash of anger, then softened as he looked at me. "Don't you ever believe that? You are my granddaughter, always." The strength in his words washed over me like a shield. The rejection, the humiliation, the pain of the night, it all shrank in the face of his simple truth. Outside the room, I heard voices rising. Caleb was arguing with a nurse, his voice sharp and insistent. My mother's tone cut in, demanding to know how I had been given this authority. The chaos swirled around us, but inside the room, none of it mattered. For the first time, I felt peace. I wasn't standing outside in the cold anymore, begging for acceptance. I was exactly where I belonged, by the side of the man who had loved me without question, without conditions, without bloodlines. The doctor reappeared, clearing his throat gently. "We'll need to discuss treatment options, Clara, but take a moment first. He's stable enough to rest, and I think he's happy you're here." I nodded, brushing tears from my face as I looked down at Grandpa. "Thank you for trusting me," I whispered. His eyes closed slowly, a faint squeeze of my hand, his only response. When I stepped back into the hallway, my family was waiting. Caleb glared at me with unfiltered hatred. My mother's eyes darted between me and the doctor, searching for something to say but finding nothing. Uncle Martin shook his head, muttering, "He should have chosen blood." I lifted my chin and walked past them, my voice steady as I said, "He chose love." The silence that followed was heavier than all their insults combined. In that moment, I realized something powerful. The door they had slammed in my face had been the same door Grandpa had opened for me years ago, and no amount of bitterness or cruelty could ever close it. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. I sat in the chair by Grandpa's bed, holding his hand, letting the warmth of his presence soak into me. He was weak, his breaths shallow, but every so often he would squeeze my hand, as if reminding me that he was still here. That simple gesture meant more than anything. For hours I had been locked outside, stripped of my place in this family. Now here I was, exactly where I was meant to be. I thought about the way Caleb had stood in front of the door, how my mother's eyes had gone cold, how Uncle Martin had muttered his disapproval without hesitation. I replayed it all in my mind, but the sting didn't cut as deeply now. Their rejection was nothing compared to the trust Grandpa had placed in me. I realized that I didn't need their approval anymore. The doctor returned and went over Grandpa's condition. The decisions were difficult: possible procedures, risks, what recovery might look like. Each choice felt overwhelming, but I stayed steady. I asked questions, listened carefully, and thought about what Grandpa would want. I realized that this was why he had chosen me. Not because I was the oldest, not because I had the right bloodline, but because he knew I would honor his wishes with love and respect. That was a responsibility I would never take lightly. When the doctor left, I leaned closer to Grandpa and whispered, "You gave me a gift tonight. They tried to take my place, but you made sure they couldn't. You made sure I knew where I belonged." His eyelids fluttered, and though his voice was barely audible, I heard him murmur, "Always my star." The words brought tears to my eyes, but this time they weren't tears of shame or pain. They were tears of gratitude. He had reminded me of something I had forgotten. Love is stronger than blood. When I finally stepped out of the room, my family was waiting in the hallway. The air was thick with tension. Caleb leaned against the wall, his face red with anger. My mother's arms were crossed, her expression stiff and unreadable. Uncle Martin shook his head, muttering under his breath. Caleb was the first to speak. "You think this changes anything? You'll never be one of us." I met his glare with a calm I didn't know I had. "I don't need to be one of you. I was never fighting for your acceptance. I was fighting to be there for the man who never doubted me." My mother's eyes flickered, something almost like guilt crossing her face, but she said nothing. Uncle Martin scoffed and turned away. For once, their silence didn't crush me. It freed me. I walked past them without slowing down. Each step felt lighter, stronger. Their rejection no longer defined me. Grandpa's choice had rewritten everything. When the sun began to rise, I sat outside the hospital, watching the light stretch across the parking lot where I had spent the darkest hours of my life. I remembered the way I had collapsed on the curb, convinced I was nothing. Now, sitting in the same spot, I felt different. I hadn't been erased. I had been seen. I had been chosen. The lesson settled into me like a truth I would never forget. Family isn't about bloodlines or legal documents. It's about who shows up when it matters, who loves you without conditions, who trusts you to carry their heart when they can't carry it themselves. Grandpa had given me that gift, and no one could take it away. As I drove home later that morning, exhaustion pulled at me. But beneath it was a quiet strength I hadn't felt before. I thought about the years I had spent chasing after my family's approval, bending myself into pieces trying to be what they wanted. I realized now that I didn't need their permission to belong. Grandpa had already given me everything I needed. I also thought about what would come next. There would be more arguments, more cold shoulders, more attempts from Caleb to push me aside. But none of that scared me anymore. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't unwanted. I carried Grandpa's trust, and that meant more than any cruel word they could throw at me. Later that week, I returned to the hospital. Caleb wasn't there, and neither was Uncle Martin. My mother sat in the corner of the room, quiet, watching me as I helped Grandpa sip water. She didn't say much, but I caught her staring at me with something softer than I had seen in years. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was recognition. Or maybe she was finally realizing what Grandpa had always known. Whatever it was, I didn't press her. I didn't need her words anymore. As I left the room that evening, I kissed Grandpa's forehead and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me. I'll never let you down." Walking out into the cool night air, I knew that my life had changed forever. I wasn't the girl sitting in the parking lot crying anymore. I was the granddaughter Elias Carter had trusted to stand for him when it mattered most. That night taught me something I would carry for the rest of my life. Love is louder than blood, louder than rejection, louder than every locked door. And no matter what anyone said, I would always belong. So that's the night everything changed for me. I walked into that hospital feeling like I had no place in my own family, and I walked out knowing I didn't need their approval to belong. My grandfather's love was enough, and his trust gave me the strength I'll carry for the rest of my life. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt like an outsider fighting to be seen, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more true stories like this, make sure to hit the like button, share this video with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps these stories alive. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Until next time, take care of yourself and hold on to the people who choose you for who you truly are.